Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining today's discussion. It's going to be an hour and 30 minutes, and we're going to talk about something that really resonates well with us. It's the Grant Cycle 8. We're looking at global learning dialogues today, from process to practice. In the next hour and a half, we're going to look at global reflections on community engagement and key focuses on Window 1. And of course, we'll get more feedback on Window 2 as we proceed with the dialogue. So we're looking at sharing what worked, what challenges communities are facing, and what countries can take forward. But also for communities, it's all about learning from each other. So we're going to have an interesting conversation where we'll hear from communities themselves on their own perspective, what has been going on, but also loop in the Global Fund team to let us know how does looking forward to processes moving to practice kind of sounds like, what's going on, what's the new deal, what do we need to be keeping an eye out, but also open it up again to communities, and that means you, in giving us a little bit of feedback. We'll begin shortly on this, but as we proceed, we'll just dive into why are we having this discussion today? Why are we talking about GC8, especially Window 1 and Window 2? We know what's happening for the last year, year and a half, almost running to the second year. We're looking at tighter funding. We're looking at, prioritization pressure. So what is crucial, what is not? We're looking at how sustainability can now come into focus, come into play. And you've seen there's a lot of writing that a lot of communities have been doing. Kudos to you. We've been holding it in for a year and a half. But the beauty is we take these spaces as Global Fund regional learning hubs to hear from communities. This is a space for community voices. So it's more about learning from each other. And you'll find that a lot of experiences that are going to be shared will be reflecting what you're going through, or you'll be even learning and having aha moments from other countries on what is happening. So just a flow of what's going to happen today. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's only an hour, 30 minutes. So we're going to try and make this as brief and as impactful as possible. I'll remind all the speakers that we do have translation. So just the way I was speaking so fast, I'll try and pace myself so that our translators can also hear. So we have all the six learning hubs from the Global Fund. That means we have six language interpretation. So it's originally in English, but we have Russian, Arabic, Spanish, Portuguese, you name it. So all the six learning hubs have been are on the call, and you can access the translation services on the right side of your laptop. Or if you're using your phone, there's an icon that has a globe. Please click on that, choose the desired language you'd want to listen in, and always remember to mute the original language so that you can get clear feedback. So, as I mentioned, we know why we're here. This is for communities. We're going to also look at lessons from GC8, funding request development from the community's perspective, and bring in the investment support perspectives from the Global Fund, then interactive Q&A, and of course, closing reflections on what next and what to expect from the learning hubs. So make the most of this particular session. Use the chat function, introduce yourself, leave your contact details. It's all about networking. We're going to shortly have a poll. Two simple questions. I would want you to help us fill in these questions just to understand, have a sense of what is happening across the Global Fund countries of implementation. But do also ask questions. So the chat Q&A option, please use that for the questions. I know at times the chat function gets flooded. So if you do have a direct question for a direct speaker, please use the Q&A option and keep it practical. So focus on lessons today's recommendations, what can be taken forward. We've gone through a lot, so it's good time for us to just, look at the positive side. So yeah, we will begin shortly, and I'm going to request my colleague to actually uh, pull out the poll prompt, if we can have that live. But in the meantime, please rename your account so that we can know who's on the call. Use the chat function for introductions. Leave your contacts. Let us know what you're doing. But in the meantime, please just fill in this particular three-question poll. I'm sharing my screen so you can actually see the answers as they come in. I know we have over 170 people, so thank you so much for creating time to just join this discussion. So we'll give it a little bit of some time before I stop sharing the poll. So just let us know which country you're joining from.
Then I also have our second speaker is Ange Mavula from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Apart from that, we have Sergio. Sergio Lopez is a gay activist and program officer with Somos Gay. Sergio is from Latin American and Caribbean region. And then we also have Jane Kegi Alex. Jane Kegi Alex is from MENA region and a project manager from National Empowerment of Positive Women United from South Sudan. I'll request Lizzie to please post their detailed bio into the chat so that our participants can go through it. Starting quickly, uh, Dr. Poli, are you here?
Yes, I am. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much. I'm just
Yes, can you
making
hear
sure that you
me?
are here. Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining. So, Dr. Polly, I will we can start, and my first question will be directed to you. Like, given that the timelines and shifting priorities during Grant Cycle 8, which approach more strengthen meaningful community participation in the funding request processes, may I request you to please highlight what lessons would you recommend other countries to adopt and adapt at the same time? You have 5 minutes, Dr. Polly, and the floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chinmi, for allowing me to share my experience and lesson learned from the recent GCA process. So, as you may know, recently Cambodia has reached the level, the achievement of the 95, 95, 95. But with this high level of achievement, Cambodia continue to have a number of priority, a number of important issues that need to be addressed. So, as part of the engagement in the GCA process, we as CBO and CBO and CSO, we work very constructively together to achieve a very great result. So the key issue that we would like to share with all of you today is around the aspect of integration and domestic investment. So what we mean by integration? The integration in our Cambodian context is include two main parts. The number one is the integration of CBO and CSO effort into the primary healthcare system, where we can use that local mechanism to strengthen our CSO and CBO engagement in the education and awareness, which is linked to the country response. Yes, so this is the point number one. Point number two, integration is the whole idea of including CSO and CBO activity into what we call commune and Sankat mechanism. So this second integration is around the aspect of ensuring that we have the country system, we have the community system to allow engagement of CBO and CBO to happen, plus the provision of local budget to support the engagement of CBO and CSO in what they are doing in the ground. Yes, so I like to distinguish between the 2 points. The integration of CBO and CSO effort into the primary healthcare system is the mechanism that allow intervention. By intervention, I mean education and prevention using the health system mechanism. But the second part is around the use of the commune and Sankat mechanism to allow CBO to take action at that community level with the financial support expected from the local mechanism. So this is integration. The second thing is the domestic investment and social contracting. So this is also very crucial. By domestic investment, we mean the effort to ensure that the country will accept to use the local government budget. We have two sources of government budget. The number one, the main one, is from the Ministry of Economy and Finance, and the number two is from the local commune and zakat. So we convince and we urge the government to accept to use those budget to support CSO and CBO activity at the national level. Along that side, we also urge and advocate for the acceptance of social contracting. Why so? This happened because, as you may know, because of the huge reduction of external budget, we really need internal budget to support the engagement and to support the activity at the country level. One of the key actors in our society in Cambodia, we use CSO and CBO as the frontline actor in response to key activity at the community level. So in that connection, we use social contracting mechanism to allow the government system to formally recruit active CSO and CBO to perform their work. So the two aspects, domestic investment is around the making sure that the money is available to be spent for CSO and CBO engagement, and social contracting is the mechanism that allow proper formal recruitment of key people from the CSO and CBO side to act as frontline performer at the community level. Okay, so I stop here. These are the points to share with all of you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pauly. It was really nice to know your experience. I will keep you on hold for now. Probably, I would first want to make sure that all the speakers respond, and then we go into the more detailed discussion. Um, so for our next speaker, I would like to invite Ange Mavula from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Ange, the question for you is, when resources were insufficient to fund all community priorities, what strategies help communities influence prioritization and protect their most critical needs? And what would you recommend that countries do differently in future funding cycles? Ange, you have 5 minutes and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. Lorsque les ressources étaient insuffisantes, nous partons de cette expérience pour financer les priorités des communautés. Celles-ci, donc les communautés, ont dû travailler sur 5 stratégies pour protéger leurs besoins essentiels. La première stratégie, c'est la priorisation des interventions dites essentielles. Et ces interventions ont été identifiées sur ce qui touche directement à la vie, donc l'accès au traitement, que ce soit antirétroviraux ou le médicament anti-TB et paludisme, et aussi tout ce qui est prévention, le soutien à l'observance, la lutte contre la stigmatisation, l'accompagnement psychosocial et tout ce qui est suivi dirigé par les communautés. Donc, au lieu d'aller dans toutes les activités, on a privilégié ces activités pour que ça soit priorisé. Le cas typique de la République démocratique du Congo, pendant la période où après le retrait ou la suspension de PEPFAR, les PODI, donc les postes de distribution communautaires qui étaient dans des zones couvertes par PEPFAR, ont continué à fonctionner. C'est vrai qu'avec un rythme un peu réduit, mais au moins les activités continuaient à se faire. Donc, ce choix de concentrer l'effort communautaire sur l'accès au traitement et à l'observance illustre en fait une priorisation des interventions jugées indispensables pour les communautaires plutôt qu'une dispersion. La deuxième stratégie, c'est la production et l'utilisation des données communautaires. Donc, le suivi dirigé par le communauté. Et par rapport à ça, la crise, survenue après la suspension de PEPFAR, qui a un peu changé totalement le paysage financier, a fait que toutes l'activité CLM qui est en œuvre dans les zones PEPFAR ont été suspendues. Et les acteurs communautaires étaient aussi non payés. Et ce que nous avions pu faire dans notre cas, c'est que nous avons pu intégrer ces zones couvertes par PEPFAR dans la zone d'intervention du CLM que nous menons avec Global Fund. C'est une façon aussi de pouvoir couvrir le gap qui a été créé par PEPFAR. La troisième stratégie, c'est le plaidoyer collectif plutôt qu'individuel. Les communautés ont obtenu davantage de poids lorsqu'ils ont parlé d'une seule voix, hein, en construisant des positions communes avec les autres organisations de la société civile, les réseaux des patients, les programmes nationaux et les partenaires techniques et financiers. Pour le cas typique de la République démocratique du Congo, face à ce risque de rupture des services liés au gel des ressources, les communautés se sont mobilisées en consortium pour missionner à Impact et gagner un projet Impact for HIV qui consiste justement à lutter contre le VIH avancé dans les centres de santé. Donc, cette action commune, donc communauté d'une part, programme national, les partenaires techniques, illustre en fait la force du plaidoyer et de la mise en œuvre collective plutôt d'aller de façon individuelle. La quatrième stratégie, c'est en lien avec la troisième, qui est toujours à propos du projet Impact for HIV, qui a été financé par United et qui a été négocié à un moment critique face bien sûr au risque des ruptures des services liés au gel des financements pour maintenir l'accès aux soins des malades à VIH avancé. La cinquième et la dernière stratégie sur laquelle les communautés se sont fondées, c'est en fait la mobilisation des ressources domestiques, dont le plaidoyer politique et budgétaire. Au niveau du pays, pour la République démocratique du Congo, le lancement de l'initiative présidentielle pour l'élimination du sida pédiatrique d'ici 2030 traduit un engagement politique de haut niveau au moment même où le retrait américain menaçait la riposte et s'appuie sur un effort collectif associant explicitement le gouvernement, la société civile, les communautés, le secteur privé et les partenaires. Il constitue en fait le principal signal politique d'appropriation nationale pendant la période de crise, en fait, de période de financement réduit. Mais ce que le pays devrait faire différemment lors des prochains cycles, nous pensons qu'il faille commencer la priorisation communautaire avant la préparation de la demande de financement. Ce qui a déjà fait, c'est une bonne chose. Nous avons vu comment il y a eu la repriorisation des subventions avec le Fonds mondial, justement, suite à ce changement du paysage financier. La deuxième, ce que le pays peut encore faire, c'est intégrer systématiquement les données du CLM dans la planification. Ces données doivent être considérées comme des données programmatiques à part entière. Elles peuvent notamment documenter les ruptures des médicaments, les barrières géographiques et financières, la stigmatisation, les violations des droits et les problèmes de qualité des services. Par exemple, ici, voilà, la crise a démontré la fragilité du CLM, dépendant totalement du financement externe. Donc, la suspension dans les zones PEPFAR, c'est un exemple illustratif. La quatrième chose que les pays doivent faire différemment, c'est protéger un paquet minimum pour les activités communautaires. Donc, le pays devrait définir avant le cycle de financement un ensemble d'interventions communautaires considérées comme non négociables, avec, quel, avec plutôt qu'elles ne soient pas, comment dire, sacrifiées lorsque les ressources diminuent. Donc, quelle que soit la réduction des financements, un certain nombre d'activités doivent être maintenues. L'avant-dernière chose que les pays doivent faire, c'est le financement domestique qui est un axe majeur vraiment du plaidoyer. Donc, le financement extérieur ne devrait pas être la seule garantie de survie des interventions communautaires. Les pays devraient progressivement inscrire dans leurs budgets nationaux les fonctions communautaires essentielles à la lutte contre le VIH, la tuberculose et l'hépatite. J'ai entendu mon prédécesseur parler des contrats sociaux ou de la contractualisation avec les agents de santé communautaire. La dernière chose que les pays doivent faire, c'est préparer plusieurs scénarios financiers. Pour chaque cycle, il serait utile de disposer de trois scénarios. Le premier, c'est le financement optimal. Le deuxième, c'est le financement intermédiaire. Et le troisième, c'est le financement minimal, avec des interventions à préserver dans chacun de ces scénarios. Cela permet aux communautés de négocier rapidement lorsque l'enveloppe finale est inférieure aux attentes. Comme message clé, je dirais que lorsque les ressources sont limitées, les communautés doivent être en mesure de démontrer non seulement ce dont elles ont besoin, mais surtout ce qui doit absolument être protégé. Et pourquoi ça doit être protégé, combien cela coûte et quelles seront les conséquences si cette intervention n'était pas financée. Voilà rapidement résumé ce que les communautés peuvent faire et ont fait lorsque les ressources sont insuffisantes. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, NJ. Now, moving forward to our next speaker, I would like to invite Sergio Lopez from MENA region. Sergio, are you here?
Hello. Yes, I am
Thank
here.
you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sergio. So, Sergio, the question to you is what enable meaningful community engagement in channeling political, humanitarian, or conflict settings, and what can other countries learn from your experience? Sergio, you have 5 minutes, and the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chimney. Just to clarify, I am from Latin America. I am Sergio. I am based in Paraguay, currently taking this call from home. And thank you so much for the space. I've listened to what was mentioned before, and I see definitely a lot of similarities, especially coming from Paraguay. I also work in collaboration with a regional network that is called Gay Latino. So we were able during this process to also kind of assess what the processes were nationally in Central America, in other countries that were presenting for window 1 and 2. Originally in Paraguay, where I am based, and I have more deep experience working with the CCM closely here in Paraguay. We are currently in a context of very difficult work with the government because of precisely politically, it's very difficult to maintain a sense of collaboration when the politics locally are very much aligned with the Trump administration in the US and the cataclysm of consequences that it caused. Locally here, we have some progress made with the Global Fund projects. Nationally, we were able to strongly position more services in some type of collaboration with the Ministry of Health. But currently, our humanitarian response is the one that is facing more challenges. For example, during the writing of the proposal for GC8, we were able to discuss and negotiate with the government, for example, transitioning to domestic financing through municipalities in Paraguay and through local health councils. That is the way we organize local responses, health responses in general. What was advised to us during the process was to us communities was to advocate for including HIV as a top priority in the local municipal health plans, for example. But that has proven to be very challenging because of, again, the way that our Ministry of Health is approaching the HIV response, and particularly the way they are envisioning transitioning to domestic funding is to take over all of the community responses. And because Paraguay has a really, I have to admit, it's a very good architecture of health in terms of the family health units, for example, that exist that has a really national coverage. So the idea was to scale up the community services and work in collaboration with key populations and organizations that are providing services. But that has proven to be like inexistent so far. In Paraguay, we have a strong emphasis on sustainability and transition, but and we do have a lot of opportunities, for example, in the expansion of PrEP programs. But we do have to recognize that even with the government support, and even though they want to sustain those services, it will not close the gap that we have if we don't work in close collaboration with the communities. I also know and wanted to mention, in case um, this is serving other countries also, because of the legitimacy of our government and because of a lot of socio-political issues, HIV is no, it's not a priority for our country, and it's only a priority for communities who are providing services through our organizations, and because the government is the same one that is actively trying to either close our entities or trying to dismantle any progress that we've made program-wise, it is very hard to just envision how we're going to transition smoothly to a more state-sponsored collaboration. Something that organizations are thinking now is developing plans to sustain some type of enterprise serving the needs of organizations, but that has also proven to be very difficult, even though it is included in the package of what will be the next project for Paraguay. I just wanted to mention lastly that we are facing a lot of challenges also, not only as AIDS services organizations, but also as LGBT or entities working more towards sexual diversity or sexual diversity and LGBTI issues. Paraguay, for example, is the only country in the region of Latin America that doesn't have any anti-discrimination law. So that's also proving to be very challenging for us when we think of social enablers of the epidemic. And we hope to be able to negotiate more with the local CCM. We have a couple of weeks, we have a couple of calls this week, so I'll be happy to keep reporting. And thank you again for this space. It's very informative.
Thank you so much, Sergio, for like precise and being on time. And I also apologize for um, inviting you as MENA as a part as a speaker from MENA region. So for our next speaker, we have now we go to MENA region, and I would like to invite Jane KG Alex, project manager from National Empowerment of Positive Women from South Sudan. Um, Jane, a question for you is what enable meaningful community engagement in challenging political, humanitarian, or conflict settings, and what can other countries learn from your experience? Jane, you have 5 minutes, and before that, I would like to request participants that you can use the interpretation and select Arabic language to hear the presentation from Jane. Jane, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator. As you said, my name is Jane KG Alex. I work as a KVP project manager with NEPO, the National Empowerment of Positive Women United, a women-led network of people living with the HIV in South Sudan, and a sub-recipient under the Global Fund grant. South Sudan is one of the Global Fund challenging operating environment. We are the youngest nation, as all of us know, still recovering from decades of conflict. Health infrastructure is weak. Insecurity seasonal flooding regularly cut off access to entire county. In 2025, we faced a major shock when suspension of U.S. foreign assistance disrupted funding that largely share of our South Sudan community-led HIV service depend on. That is the environment in which our GC8 engagement and implementation, and now our GC8 funding request process continue to take place. Despite all that, the community in South Sudan were at the top. Let me say we are at the table. I want to share 3 things that make that possible, drawing from our lesson from GC7, and that I believe other countries in fragile setting can take from our experience. As I put very clear in the slide, we have over 65,000 people living with the HIV on earth in South Sudan. And funding issue is a big challenge. But I like to emphasize how we remain on board. I have 3 points here that I'm going to talk about. Point 1 is the community network. Especially we have people living with the HIV, and the KP consequences serve as a standing structure, not a one-off consultation. Our single biggest lesson from GC7 was that the meaningful engagement in a fragile setting can be built not from scratch, but in the structure that we have already that is existing. We had already existing structure like NEPO and our sister network, SNEP, already a permanent community trusted and owned people. We have structures in all across the 10 states. South Sudan have 10 states in the country. And in these 10 states, we have our people already based there. We did not arrive in GC7 country dialogue, not an outsider needing an introduction, but our peer counselor and mentor mothers and the community volunteers are already inside the facility and inside the community, including places such as a hard to reach, and the existing trust meant what the funding request window open, and it makes it very easy for mobilization, a real community evidence and testimony quickly instead of starting a partnership building from zero. Lesson I will say to my colleague, lesson for GC8 is we carry out this forward, the existing structure, and we insisted to have a seat at the CCM and then in the technical working group from the very start of window 1, not as afterthought once the funding request was already draft. We started from the initial. And then the second point is adapting how we engage, not whether we engage. In the conflict setting situation like ours, and especially when the money continues to become little and little, every day the bucket is just straining. In GC8, we learn to adopt decentralized state-level consultation where insecurity allowed phone and radio-based feedback, where we cannot travel or travel is possible, working through those trusted volunteers who can safely reach community that program staff cannot. We also learn to build flexibility into our work planning, accepting that consultation should schedule for 1 week might not be happen over 3. Because of the flooding, insecurity, and displacement normally happen in our country, our founder and learning hubs have understood this, and they did not penalize us for it. It enabled us to deliver credible, at least on time. And then the lesson we carry forward for GCA is that we use the same adaptive approach in window 1, so that people living with HIV, women, and the key population most affected by the epidemic were not the one left out. And then the third point is protecting the community priority when resources is small. In GC8, the most issue of the finance that we all know that it is everybody is seeing coming out from the 2025 PEPFAR disruption, our own network lost a large or a huge share of the funding and dozens of volunteers overnight. That experience taught us that when resources tighten, the community priority, human rights, gender, stigma, and services for key and vulnerable population are usually the first to be cut from the funding request, unless the community are organized enough to actively defend themselves as a prioritization table. In GC7 and now in GC8 window 1, our approach has been and to come to prioritization discussion, not just with needs, but with evidence, data on the stigma, no HIV prevention, treatment, interaction, unlimited number of mentor mothers and peer counselors see every day. That evidence-based advocate is that what allowed us to keep community-led component in funding requests, even as if this overall lesson for GCA, yes.
Jane, I will request you to wrap up in 1 minute, please.
Sorry?
I will request you to wrap up in 1 minute.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. We work with NASOS, CSO network in South Sudan to share our GCA implementation experience and lesson learned. In civil society organization, grant making meeting to help the civil society organization have a single voice to protect and defend community-led intervention during the grant making with the CCM and other stakeholders, establishing the bottom line to prevent essential life saving. All in all, I will say in the conclusion, the three, the others that I can say, maybe if they are not doing the same like us, they can also adapt. Those are the recommendations we are saying. Invest between the cycle, not just, during them, or budget for community engagement itself. Defend priority with the evidence when budget is small. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jane. As we move forward to our final round of question, I'm going to ask all four panelists the same closing question, and you will have strictly just like 1 minute to make sure that we end our session on time. And I will first invite Jane to respond to the question. Looking across your GCA experience, what is the one lesson you would recommend that countries adopt, avoid, and adapt in upcoming funding request processes and in GCA implementation? Jane, over to you. Please finish in 1 minute.
Basically, for me, I will say it. When we go for discussion, I will request my colleague to back themselves up with the evidence, as I said, because making a request without the evidence base cannot push you everywhere. But if you have the data at hand and you talk using the data to back up your request, it gives more knowledge. I mean, it gives more way forward into that. Yeah, and then having a group as a one voice, having the civil society gather and have one voice instead of having many people that cannot even talk and use the same language. Thanks.
That's definitely important, Jane. Thank you so much. Dr. Polly, I would like to pass on that same question to you. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Thank you very much for asking this very important question. So for us in Cambodia, one of the very important lesson that we have learned is that the CSO and CBO will continue to play a very crucial role in the response against HIV in HIV. So we have to do our best in order to move forward. So in that connection, we should try to find a very efficient way in partnering with responsible agent. So in our case, we rely on the National AIDS Authority, in short NA, who has been very active in the field of HIV/AIDS and who is very keen in providing assistance and support in moving forward, meaning in supporting the role of CSO and CBO in the response on HIV/AIDS. A very important point is that this role is not only trying to ensure that the role of the CBO and CBO will continue further, but it will play like a very foundation to ensure sustainability of the response in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Polly. I would like to pass on this similar question to NJ. NJ, over to you. Hi, NJ. Are you still on the webinar? Probably not. Sergio?
Yes.
Hi, Sergio. Yeah. I would like to pass on this same question to you. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please. Just
Okay. Thank you. So the question is, looking across your GC8 experience, what is the one lesson you would recommend that countries adopt, avoid, and adopt in upcoming funding request processes and in GC8 implementation?
yes, thank you. And in case any other countries, and I know most of us are entering the transition discussion. One thing I learned and I would recommend is to ask for concrete evidence from countries about sustaining national responses in alliance with community-based organizations. As of now in Paraguay, we have no real indication or way to validate, other than in verbal commitments, how the Ministry of Health will fund grassroots organizations led by key populations in particular. Like I said before, we achieved a lot with the Global Fund, especially in the last years. And now that we are best equipped technically to scale up that progress, we are not only running out of funding, but also having this difficulty working with our government. So sometimes it feels just performative, something that we should adopt in CCM discussions and other spaces where those decisions are made, is to be more honest and transparent about prioritizing communities. Because if we have an official statement from governments, for example, proving that they are not willing to fund us or working with us, then we can knock on other doors for support. But just to keep honest discussions, and again, keep a way to ask for concrete evidence about how we're going to transition from this model to the domestic funding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sergio. Um, First of all, I would like to thank you to all four of our incredible panelists for such rich and practical insights. And also, in interest of time, I would like to thank you, the participants, as well for listening patiently. If there are any questions and reflections, we have a specific Q&A session coming up later on. So please hold your questions. And with that, I am pleased to hand over this microphone again to Lizzie. Lizzie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Inmei. That was quite enlightening. And I like the perspective of communities just bringing in the truth and defending how they need to be involved in the whole process. And it's good just to get different perspective. We were in South Sudan, we moved to Cambodia. I mean, it was a whole global experience. So thank you so much, Chinmay, for handling that. We are moving to the second segment. As I mentioned earlier on, it's only an hour and 30 minutes. We have 3 segments. This is the second segment, and the last segment will be the Q&A section, which is coming up in the next 10 minutes. So I'd like to welcome the Global Fund team. And from the Global Fund's desk, we just want to hear about the TRP investment support perspectives, what we have learned so far, what are we taking forward. And we do have 2 speakers share their bio on the chat so that you can deep dive on what Liam and Georgina do at the Global Fund and a little bit of background about what they do. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite them so that we can have a kind of discussion in the next 10 minutes, give or take. So, Liam and Georgina, over to you guys. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Lizzie. Well, thank you so much for having us. My name is Hye Young. I'm a Community Rights and Gender Advisor for the Asia Pacific region. The previous session was really so interesting. I really thank of course, the facilitator, but also Dr. T, Sergio, Angie, and Jane for your great interventions. And as I speak, I actually need to quote some of what you have emphasized and some of your points, because those are such wonderful points that really connect us together. So without further ado, I want to maybe discuss 2, I guess, big buckets of issues. One focuses on the process of the Global Fund, and second focuses on more of the content challenge that we are seeing in the Window 1 and some of the Window 2 countries, even though the Window 2 countries, as you know, are going through the TRP. So the initial, the challenge that I see in the Global Fund processes, and maybe the opportunities also, is the process how it was done in GC8, which is quite different from GC7. First of all, many of you, I also see there are members of the CCM are among the participants, and many of you have participated or led a community consultation and joined the country dialogue. The process for the applying the Global Funds, the grants in GC8 was much more compressed compared to GC7. We had a very short windows, and also we introduced a new modality of coming with a funding request, grant-ready documents. And grant-ready documents were used for many of the high-impact countries. And grant-ready basically means that country comes with almost complete documents. And TRP, we go through TRP reviews, but still there's a lot of work that has been done before the TRP. And because it was grant-ready, the role of PRs have become very strong in preparing the documentation. And that also meant, in some cases, the role of civil society, community members in the CCM to engage and really fully brief on the process and the content has been a challenge. So that's one challenge that I have in a way noted during the process. And I was so glad to see that many of the participants from the CCM are on this webinar. I think in that case, the role of KP and community representatives on the CCM becomes critical. And on the Global Fund website, I don't know whether you ever had access to it, but we do have information on the CCM Secretariat, and the key contact person on the CCM. If you are unsure about how you engage in the Global Fund processes, please access those information and reach out to them and copy the country team or copy us where we can facilitate your engagement or identify the opportunities. We will do so. Of course, I'm going to be very honest. Not all the cases we will be able to identify the entry point, but I will do my best to facilitate the process. And secondly, maybe more importantly, And related to that is the programmatic the challenges. In Asia Pacific region, I was really happy to see Dr. T on the panel to really discuss Cambodian experience. We are really facing the challenge with the deprioritization. And sometimes we are really facing the deprioritization based solely on the current epidemic information, the data, which means sometimes the country needs to make a very difficult decision on deprioritizing certain key populations, the communities, or the geographical deprioritization. And second, integration. I see that Dr. T has also emphasized integration. We are seeing push for the integration of HIV and TB services in primary healthcare settings, use of the community health workers, polyvalent workers, to take on more work on the HIV, TB, malaria space. And three, importance and heightened importance and push for the social contracting. So I want to put all these areas are really important. However, we know when the key populations are deprioritized based on the current epidemiology, when we are asked to integrate HIV, TB services in the primary healthcare services, we cannot do that effectively unless we have enabling environments that allows the accessibility of the services for all populations. I really appreciate what Sergey mentioned on, you're working with the government who wants to scale up, who wants to support the HIV response, the health response, but it's the very same government that also supports the environment where the access healthcare service is very difficult for many of the key populations. So as we see this push for deprioritization, integration, and social contracting, we are also seeing the challenge of pushing for the human rights and gender programming in this resource constrained context. I do recognize many countries are increasing investments or some key pockets of the human rights and gender programs. However, I feel in GC8, given the resource constraints, we are really asked to make a prioritization even with the human rights gender programming. And one thing that I also want to highlight on the social contracting, we do use the social contracting as a mechanism to make sure the community-led responses are sustainable. However, we do understand in order for the social contracting to work, we need to make sure we have the policies and structures in place. Not only the civil society or community-led organization to be registered, that's one thing, and the investments in CSS for supporting the communities and civil society to register and be able to deliver services, that's the important factor. But we also need to see how the social contracting is actually done. Sometimes it is basically buying the services from civil societies, or sometimes the contract is a one-year contract. There's no sustainability for the civil society. So we really have to understand the whole structure of the social contracting in order for us to make that work for the communities and civil societies. I feel we have a lot of work to do in GCA, but what I have always admired is the resistance and participation, knowledge of the communities. And while, as I mentioned to you, community participation have been quite challenging, the countries where we were able to mobilize the small grants or the CI technical assistance for the engagement, we have seen much stronger input on the funding request, and also stronger focus on the CRG responses in the funding request. So really thank you for your leadership and continued support. Thank you. Georgina.
Hi, Lizzie. Shall I just continue?
Yeah, please proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name's Georgina and I am Hae Young's colleague. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I'd really like to add my thanks to Hae Young's thanks for the experiences that have been shared by speakers today. So just like Hae Young, I support investments. The set of portfolios that I work on are different, They are high impact portfolios across 6 countries in West and Central Africa. So the reflections that I'm sharing today are really based on my review of the Window 1 submissions from 3 of these countries, from Burkina, Cote d'Ivoire, and Nigeria. And I hope that these reflections, that they add on to Hae Young's and that they'll be useful to you. So the first observation, my first observation, is related to human rights and gender matching funds. Now, I recognize that not all countries have these human rights and gender matching funds, but where countries do have access to them, it is so important that we use that opportunity. In the West and Central African context, where several countries have access to this financing, it's really proving to be very important. Several countries in the region have laws that criminalize key populations, and the situation is not getting any easier. And it really restricts the ability of people from key populations to access essential services. In Window 1, I have observed community-led organizations, CSOs, really take a lead in designing some of these human rights and gender interventions, often using CLM data, using PLHIV stigma index data, and other community-driven data to really guide thinking around, what these interventions can look like. So in short, the matching funds have really helped protect space for critical interventions that might otherwise struggle to compete for resources within a bigger funding request. So if your country is yet to submit and has access to human rights and gender matching funds, please do make sure that you are part of shaping these interventions. The second important observation from Window 1 links to the gender module. So GC8 is the first time that we have a dedicated gender module, which is separate from a human rights module. And this has opened up opportunities for greater investment in women-led organizations and in interventions that address gender-related barriers to accessing services across HIV, TB, malaria, but also interventions that promote reproductive, maternal, child, and adolescent health. So this is a very positive development because gender-related barriers are often structural barriers and can't simply be addressed through the provision of commodities or services. At the same time, one challenge that I've observed in some of the submissions is that the gender interventions can be described quite broadly, and the corresponding budgets can also be quite broad. So the connection between the gender-focused intervention and the expected health outcome or the impact is not always explicit. So I'm sharing this again for countries preparing submissions in Window 3 and subsequent windows. We need to really thinking, with this from a gender, really making most of this gender module and thinking about what specific gender-related barrier are we trying to address, which population is affected, how will the proposed intervention address it, and then how will addressing that barrier actually contribute to health outcomes. So making that chain of logic can really help strengthen the investment case. My third observation is around community-led monitoring, or CLM. This is a point mentioned by Ange from DRC today. We are seeing a positive evolution in the CLM budget. In a number of the Window 1 submissions, there are budget lines that appear to cover the full CLM cycle. So not only the collection of data, but the important steps that follow the collection of data. So this includes feeding information back to communities, using the evidence for advocacy and for change. This is really an important shift because CLM is most powerful when data isn't just collected and reported. It needs to be used to identify problems, engage decision makers, drive improvements in systems and in services. So for countries yet to submit, one observation from the Window 1 countries is that whilst it's great that we have the full cycle of CLM represented, a lot of these advocacy budgets tend to be really small, and they're often framed around meetings. So it'd be useful to think a bit more about what kind of advocacy is required to bring about change. And, if CLM is identifying, for instance, a persistent service delivery problem, what combination of community engagement, communication, evidence generation, coalition building, campaigning is needed to actually address it? Because at the moment, these advocacy budgets are really, really small. Finally, the last point I want to make is around community annexes. I really want to highlight the importance of the dialogues and the annexes. These processes provide a really important mechanism for documenting community priorities. And these, priorities that are agreed by all communities. I really like how Jane talked about the importance of communities coming together and having some unified positions. And I think actually all speakers alluded to this in some way or another. In one of the Window 1 countries, I mapped the priorities identified in the community annex against what made it into the funding request. And 18 of the 20 priorities were reflected in the request. And I found this to be a bit of a powerful example of how the community annex can function, not just as a sort of documentation requirement, but also as an accountability and a prioritization tool. So for countries yet to go through future windows, I strongly recommend giving attention and really making visible the priorities that are listed in the community annex throughout the process, all the way through submission and even through to grant making. I'm going to stop there for now, and I hope that these reflections, which are quite specific potentially to Western Central Africa, are useful additions to Hey Young. Thank you. Back to you, Lizzie.
Thank you so much. Please don't leave. I know there are going to be questions. The good news is I had 5 minutes set aside for the closing, which we're going to use for Q&A. I'm going to call out to Bakata Henry. I've seen that hand for quite some time. If my colleague Richard, you can help just unmute Bakata so that Bakata can proceed with the question. But in the meantime, I like what Georgina has just mentioned. I mean, the beauty and the strength of data is something that really cannot be refuted by anyone. And of course, with communities, we have the data. And there's an ongoing single study that's been conducted by the Global Advocacy Data Hub. Those are a group of organizations and partners who are trying to gather more feedback and input from communities and civil society about donor integration, transition, how to advocate for accountability. And it looks like we're going to have a lot of advocacy around accountability, and we're going to have to do this in unison. So please, I'll ask the team to also kind of share the link to the single study so that we can have access to that. Now, before Bakata joins, this is the section for the Q&A. We have exactly, I'm doing good with time. We have 20 good minutes that we can use and kind of just nib the last part of the conclusion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but please, when you're asking your question, make it very brief, direct it to a particular speaker. If it's a comment, just let us know where you're calling from, you're joining from. And we do have the poll still going live. I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can have, yes, Bakata, over to you. You can just unmute yourself. Bakata Henry? No worries. Okay, so I'll go through the Q&A section because we saw some questions come in, and thank you so much. We had over 280 participants on this particular call. So we have Ricardo Waters, and Ricardo is asking Dr. T, what proportion of the final approved Grant Cycle 8 grant is now allocated to CSOs, CBOs on HIV/TB activities that are now integrated into primary healthcare and the Ministry of Health? And conversely, what percentage of the costs of those activities by communities does the grant allocation represent? I don't know whether we still have Dr. T on the call.
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
I'm still here. Yeah.
Great. So the question is on Q&A. I don't know whether you want me to repeat it or I can just.
Thank you very much for the question, but I regret that I don't have those details. Because when it comes to detailed budget matter, honestly, I just like to clarify that we don't have direct access to those budget detail. And lately, there has been a lot of change and modification and requests from the writing team and the country team to reduce the budget. So it is hard to follow up and to have the figure, the exact figure to answer to you. So my apology on that. Thank you.
No worries. I mean, we're here to learn, and it looks like that's one of the key issues that we're facing as communities, kind of getting the last data when it comes to the budgeting and just knowing what has been allocated to what. And I'll kind of go to another question from Ricardo, and this is addressed to Sergio. So following Sergio's presentation, have any panelists been effective at securing a clear commitment? That's a very good question. With a decent, reasonable, meaningful budget allocation in the country request. Sergio? I don't know whether we still have Sergio on the call, but either Ange, you can also pick this and see if in South Sudan, have you been able to secure a clear commitment? Sorry, Ange. Yeah.
Ouais, Ange, ouais, je peux me jeter à l'eau. Merci pour la question. Engagement ferme, non. Mais au moins, les activités en rapport avec les populations clés sont bien dans les plans stratégiques nationaux. Et ce qui est dans le plan stratégique national, on suppose que c'est vraiment aussi un engagement parce que ces plans stratégiques nationaux sont ratifiés, validés par le gouvernement, donc le ministre de la Santé, le ministre du Tutelle. Mais avoir un engagement par rapport soit à la loi ou voilà, une quelconque documentation, non. Mais je pense que le fait d'apparaître dans le document stratégique, c'est déjà un engagement parce que ça rentre dans la planification, dans tout ce qui est fait. Voilà ce que je peux dire par rapport à la RDC. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. And I think that is usually the key. Whatever is included in the final documents, that is actually commitment. So it's something that we can actually use as communities to advocate. I've seen Mambo Modeste raise a hand. If we can unmute, let me just allow you real quick, Modeste, to ask your question.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Ça me fait plaisir de voir Ange intervenir. Et pour nous, c'est un grand plaisir. Je voulais juste te poser une simple question à Ange, hein, parce que là, c'est très important. Quelle est la stratégie, en fait, quelle est la stratégie mise en place par les organisations de la société civile de la RD Congo pour accompagner le gouvernement à remonter sa contribution? Car la contribution de la RD Congo à la santé est passée de 13,03% en 2025 à 10,23% en 2026. Au moment où le Fonds mondial a réduit complètement sa contribution. Maintenant, comment nous pensons que le GC8 sera effectif, le GC8 sera mis en œuvre dans des conditions équitables au moment où le gouvernement congolais a réduit de plus de 2%? Moi, j'ai besoin de comprendre. Merci beaucoup. Moi, c'est Modeste Mambami, directeur exécutif de Hommes pour les droits de la santé sexuelle. Merci.
Bonjour Modeste, merci pour ta question.
Bonjour Ange.
Nous, ouais, ça va. Nous, société civile, nous n'avons que la bouche pour parler. Et nous parlons chaque jour. Nous parlons chaque jour. Je veux, après cette réunion, vous envoyer les liens de mes émissions à la radio Top Congo, à la RTNC, à différentes radios et télévisions, justement par rapport à ça. Ce qui est sûr, c'est que nous ne baissons pas les bras. Le gouvernement est chaque fois embêté par nous. Et à chaque fois quand on sort d'une émission, on nous dit, toi là, on va te chercher à la CNS, la Commission nationale de sécurité. Parce qu'on parle trop, voilà. Je pense que c'est tout ce que nous savons faire et c'est tout ce que nous faisons. Il n'y a pas une autre stratégie quelconque, sinon le plaidoyer. Et c'est chaque jour que nous faisons le plaidoyer sur cette question de mobilisation des ressources domestiques. Je vous ai, si vous avez suivi ma présentation, j'ai parlé de l'initiative présidentielle pour l'élimination du sida d'ici à 2030. C'est la résultante aussi des actions de plaidoyer que nous avons pu mener en collaboration avec les programmes et les partenaires techniques et financiers, en premier rang l'ONU-SIDA. Donc, je pense que nous faisons ce que nous pouvons faire et nous n'allons pas baisser les bras. Nous pensons qu'ils entendent effectivement, parce que parfois, ils nous parlent dans des réunions. Ils disent, mais vous parlez, donc ça veut dire qu'ils entendent ce que nous disons. Voilà. Mais toutes les autres stratégies, s'il y en a, elles sont les bienvenues pour pousser le gouvernement à faire plus. Merci.
Thank you so much. And I think let's stop talking. I mean, they need to listen at one particular point. So as communities, please talk. You will need to be had. I'm assuming, Jane, you want to comment on the same. So over to you, Jane. And then we'll go to Kaluki and Albright. Jane, over to you.
Thank you so much, Liz. You asked a question before, but I think the network was not good, so I couldn't answer it. For us in South Sudan, I will say it's a bit not yet. As we talk now, the grant-making discussion is going on. But as usual, it is not easy. My colleagues are there. I just stepped out because of this meeting. Otherwise, I'm supposed to be there. Most of the activity of the community is put above allocation. But we are still on the table trying to push. So we don't know at the end of the day how it's going to be, but it is always like that headache. But we pray that we will try a way to maneuver it. Thanks. Over to you.
Thank you, Jane. And I think resilience is something I appreciate when it comes to civil societies and community groups. So yeah, we need to be at their table, whatever they're discussing, we need to know. So do not lose hope, Jane. I will ask Dr. T to speak, and then I'll unmute Kaluki. Dr. T.
Thank you very much. So in response to your question, I can have access to my file. So roughly, and based on the current version that we have, but the revised version may come a bit later. So currently we have a total budget for HIV and TB, $39.9 million US. TB plus HIV excluding PAR. And under that, the commitment, the allocation for all CSO combined together. When I say combined together, I mean 7 CSO, and one of which is the international. The rest, the other 6, they are local CSO. So the allocation for our CSO big team is 15.9 million. $15.9 million US out of $39.9 million. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is what I'm talking about. Resourceful civil societies. Thank you so much for just getting those numbers in. Kaluki, over to you. Please make it brief. If you're directing a question to somebody, please highlight who that is. Over to you, Kaluki.
Thank you, Lizzie. Mine is very brief, and it is on issues touching on my constituency, that is persons with disabilities and their involvement in the grant cycle and in the Global Fund conversation. For quite some time, I think we are missing the point when we talk about integration and inclusion. To integrate persons with disabilities is actually making sure that they are there, but we make decisions for them. And inclusion would mean now having persons with disabilities on the table, and having them contribute and take a part of the cake home with them. That is what inclusion is. In our various engagements, digitally, I have come to notice that we have not yet conformed to the needs of persons with disabilities in our various engagement digitally, because citing this particular meeting that is happening today, we have translators who are doing Spanish, who are doing Russian, who are doing Arabic, who are also doing Portuguese and French, but we lack a sign language interpreter. Does it then mean that those with hearing impairment are supposed to make their own arrangements to follow some of these critical engagements, or are we supposed to conform to accommodate them as well, the same way we accommodate people from other countries and people from other nationalities? My other question would be, how do we intend to include those with intellectual disabilities? Persons with intellectual disabilities, for a very long time, they are left out. Yet they are at risk. They are at risk of contracting HIV and never coming out to report or get interventions. What is it that countries have developed to make sure that they address issues of persons with neurodivergent disabilities, those with intellectual disabilities, and also those with psychosocial disorders, because they are at a very high risk of contracting HIV and AIDS, and rarely do we have them in our conversations, be it regional or national. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaluki. I think this is where I normally get very emotional, and I do appreciate you highlighting the fact that despite us trying to be very inclusive, we could actually drop a balls one area or another. I'm going to kind of hand over this particular question because it's very sensitive. I know we're talking about GC8, and I'm going to call the Global Fund team back in and also kind of see if the learning hubs have a response to this particular aspect of inclusion, and maybe ask how inclusive is the whole GC8 process, especially with Kaluki's concern, which is it's something that I see as going to be a big issue because we're integrating. That means we're moving all these discussions to government's side, and we're trying to integrate all the services into primary healthcare. And already before the discussions around integration, so persons with disabilities we still kind of were not as inclusive as we were supposed to be. So I don't know whether the GF team or any of the Learning Hub partners have a response to this, or even the speakers.
I would like to start, Lizzie, on this point. There were a couple of funding requests and budgets that we reviewed that had a huge emphasis on women with disabilities. And this was specifically under that gender module, which I referred to. And you know, the focus was very much on physical inaccessibility, lack of accessible information, issues to do with transport costs, communication barriers, dependence on caregivers, that makes it difficult to access HIV testing, TB screening, malaria prevention and treatment. So this is just to say that for sure, the Global Fund actually recognizes people with disabilities as a vulnerable population facing marginalization and challenges in accessing health and social services. Now, what happens now is then at country level, in the development of the funding requests, when looking at the data and, you know, what are the different kinds of risks and barriers that people with disabilities face around health services. I think this is where, you know, that work then needs to happen to make sure that the voice is there and that the data is there to back it up in terms of the intervention and the investment. But we did note as a team, and it wasn't just in the Western Central African countries where I had observed it, that there are a couple of other regions where we noted women with disabilities in particular make it through. I see Ange has his hand up because one of those countries is DRC as well.
Great, great. We'll go to Ange. Thank you very much. Ange, over to you.
Merci beaucoup. Juste pour dire à notre ami que c'est vrai, la question est fondée. Par exemple, chez nous, il était relevé dans le rapport de l'enquête Index Stigma que nous venons de réaliser, les difficultés d'accès aux services pour les personnes vivant avec handicap. Et ce que nous avons fait dans le GC8, je suis certain que ça passera. Nous avons intégré en fait une évaluation des dispositions dans les centres de santé pour les personnes vivant avec handicap. Ça peut être banal de petites choses, comment ils sont, est-ce qu'on a réservé un espace pour eux pour passer, là je parle des handicaps physiques, pour les malvoyants, est-ce qu'il y a des choses qui peuvent permettre à ce qu'ils puissent savoir se diriger facilement dans les services dont ils ont besoin. Pour les malentendants, la même chose. Donc, on va faire cette évaluation qui, après les résultats, ça découlerait bien évidemment des actions qu'on peut mener pour faciliter l'accès, permettre aux personnes vivant avec handicap, que ce soit handicap physique, malvoyant, les malentendants, pour qu'ils puissent accéder facilement aux services. Nous avons mis ça dans le GC7 et je pense que ça passera. L'équipe Fonds mondial est là et je crois qu'ils vont soutenir ça pour que ça puisse passer. Merci.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I know we have 3 minutes into wrapping it up, and I'd like to make just an announcement as we go. I've seen so many questions come in. My apologies if we cannot go through all of them. But the beauty is we have all the 6 learning hubs on this call, and I'm just going to request them to leave their contact details on the chat. Reason being, I cannot summarize what has been discussed in an hour, 30 minutes in 2 minutes. But what I can do is let you know that if you have direct questions or you'd want to be connected to the learning hub that overseeing all this discussion in your region, please reach out. They're going to leave their contact details. And what we're going to do, we're going to send the recordings for this. We're going to send a summarized version of what has transpired today. But this is not the end. This is just the beginning. So if you have more questions, you'd want to reach out to the speakers or you want to reach out to the Global Fund team through the learning hubs, please feel free to reach out. I would really like to appreciate all the speakers today. I'd like to appreciate you as a community representative, just taking your time to join in these discussions. Over 280 people have joined in. That is quite impressive. And I would appreciate you giving us more feedback. Fill in those surveys. We'll be sharing more. Tariro, I'm sorry. I've seen your hand up. My apologies. Please direct your questions to the learning hubs and we will definitely get back to it. On behalf of all the Global Fund learning hubs, on behalf of ENASO and on behalf of our ED, of course, we appreciate your time. Thank you, Global Fund team. Really appreciate you creating time. Have a great afternoon. And this is one of the many discussions we'll have over the years. And we're going to have more around this. So please Reach out if you need to be introduced to anybody here and if you need to be connected to the Learning Hubs. Have a great afternoon, a great morning, a great day, and thank you so much for joining today.